Our last presenter is developing the Four Corners potato for market. Please join me in welcoming my new friend, who I wanted to introduce yesterday when Abigail asked us to introduce new friends, Cynthia Wilson.
Yeah, so I work on this project in partnership with University of Utah researchers, and I work for a Native-led nonprofit. Our mission is centered around healing, which to us, healing means strengthening our ties to the land, our Native culture, and practicing our language, as well as strengthening our relationship to our non-human relatives. This is a map of southeastern Utah. Outlined in blue is Bears Ears National Monument, 1.35 million acres, designated by Obama. 85% was reduced by Trump, and what's left is what you see in light blue. In Obama's proclamation, he stated that traditional knowledge itself is a resource to be protected and used in understanding and managing this landscape sustainably for generations to come. Not only is traditional knowledge essential for land management planning, but the land itself is also essential to each of our cultures. So Bears Ears is a cultural living landscape to us. This asking for the protection of this land was a buildup of a coalition of Diné, Hopi, Ute, and Zuni. We rely on cultural resources for arts, foods, medicine, and ceremonial purposes. Basically, our history is documented within this ancestral landscape, which is public lands. A model example of traditional knowledge is the protection for the Four Corners potato. We know ancestral Puebloans utilize various cooking techniques, such as boiling it with clay to reduce the bitterness, or grinding it to make flour or yeast on old grinding stone. So the Four Corners, you can see on the map, the blue dots are archaeological populations, where the archaeological sites tied to the potato populations. In yellow are non-archaeological sites. We know that tribes traveled around this area to transport, trade, and steward these potato. In 2004 to 2008, BYU started this research studying the potato. They went to Escalante Valley, and note that this is on private land, so they went to private landowners, but historically it's probably ancestral lands to the Pueblo people. So they excavated this site back then at North Creek Shelter, and it wasn't until 2012 that the University of Utah researchers I worked with studied the starch residue that came off of the old grinding stone from this site, and they dated that back 11,000 years. So the Four Corners potato at Bears Ears, as you can see, is tied to cliff dwellings where ancestral Puebloans live. And you can see here a Ute Mountain Ute elder is giving offering water. The potato plant in the wild is very resilient. They are found in juniper, pine woodlands, pinon woodlands. So in the wild, it's very resilient. It can stay dormant for up to 8 years, and it's dependent on monsoon rain season. And in the greenhouse, you can see it's more lush. It's watered 3 times per week and in a controlled temperature. So I'll talk about growing the potato in a greenhouse setting, working with the researchers. As you can see, they're very tiny, 10 millimeters. You can see the size on a ruler and in comparison to the quarter. A stem is produced from one tuber, and at the bottom, roots are produced, which at that time you would plant it into a pot. So one individual tuber is planted in an individual pot, and they each spread more tubers. So once it's in a pot, it gets transported into a larger pot, and the stem starts to make its way up, and the flower starts to bloom, which is white and has 5 petals like a star. And the tuber starts to develop within the soil. And the researchers, they use a standard potting mix in growing this potato at Red Butte Garden. So depending on your pot size, can be 1 gallon to 5 gallon, but one tuber being planted can produce 200 to 500 new tubers in one pot within 6 months in a greenhouse. So, and they, as you can see, they grow just this tiny as same size as you planted it. So here's pictures of us harvesting the potato. We just flip side the pot and separate it from the soil. And these two birds coil all the way around the soil and inside as well. So tasting the Four Corners potato has a very earthly flavor. We had indigenous food activist Carlos Baca prepare this meal for us, and it's a representative of Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado here at my fundraising event last year for my traditional foods program. So the nutrient content in comparison to modern potato is that it's very rich with nutrients, 2 times of protein, zinc, and manganese, and it has triple the calcium and iron content. And we are looking at more tests, including vitamins. We know it's high in fiber and B vitamins as well. So my overall project is indigenizing the landscape at Bears Ears to support culturally significant plant species that warrant special management, minimizing damage, and also, most importantly, restoring these plant populations and bringing it back to the original stewards, such as these potato cultivation partners within the Four Corners region, who each took a pot home to experiment with their own traditional methods of growing it. And we're hoping that their communities would benefit culturally, spiritually, nutritionally, and economically. Overall, we want to ensure that tribes lead the homecoming of this potato, and that Native communities maximize ownership and investment in the outcome of this project. Thank you.